Jerusalem is today and must remain a place where Jews pray at the Western Wall, where Christians walk the stations of the cross, and where Muslims worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, through all of these years, presidents representing the United States have declined to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In fact, we have declined to acknowledge any Israeli capital at all. But today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This will immediately begin the process of hiring architects, engineers, and planners so that a new embassy, when completed, will be a magnificent tribute to peace. In making these announcements, I also want to make one point very clear. This decision is not intended in any way to reflect a departure from our strong commitment to facilitate a lasting peace agreement. We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved. The United States remains deeply committed to helping facilitate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both sides. I intend to do everything in my power to help forge such an agreement. Without question, Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive issues in those talks. The United States would support a two-state solution if agreed to by both sides. In the meantime, I call on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. Above all, our greatest hope is for peace, the universal yearning in every human soul. With today's action, I reaffirm my administration's long-standing commitment to a future of peace and security for the region. There will, of course, be disagreement and dissent regarding this announcement. But we are confident that ultimately, as we work through these disagreements, we will arrive at a peace and a place far greater in understanding and cooperation. This sacred city should call forth the best in humanity, lifting our sights to what it is possible, not pulling us back and down to the old fights that have become so totally predictable. Peace is never beyond the grasp of those willing to reach it. So today we call for calm, for moderation, and for the voices of tolerance to prevail over the purveyors of hate. Our children should inherit our love, not our conflicts. I repeat the message I delivered at the historic and extraordinary summit in Saudi Arabia earlier this year. The Middle East is a region rich with culture, spirit, and history. Its people are brilliant, proud, and diverse, vibrant, and strong. But the incredible future awaiting this region is held at bay by bloodshed, ignorance, and terror. Vice President Pence will travel to the region in the coming days to reaffirm our commitment to work with partners throughout the Middle East to defeat radicalism that threatens the hopes and dreams of future generations. It is time for the many who desire peace to expel the extremists from their midst. It is time for all civilized nations and people to respond to disagreement with reasoned debate, not violence. And it is time for young and moderate voices all across the Middle East to claim for themselves a bright and beautiful future. So today, let us rededicate ourselves to a path of mutual understanding and respect. Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities. And finally, I ask the leaders of the region, political and religious, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Christian and Muslim, to join us in the noble quest for lasting peace. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Israel. God bless the Palestinians. And God bless the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so really quick, let me give you some of the headlines that were popping up in anticipation of what you just heard a moment ago. ABC News, Trump to declare Jerusalem capital of Israel, White House officials are saying. And so you just saw history where that happened, obviously. And remember the debate that's going on. Is Jerusalem, should be, could be the capital of Israel? I'm a big fan, you guys are a big fan, of digging as far back into history as you can. You'll never know the truth unless you go back. You've got to go back. Well, how far back? As far back as a Wikipedia post? As far back as an archaeological shovel can take you? As far back as antiquity history can take you. The further back you go, the more close you are to reality, to the truth. And so you would ask this question, why is this even being debated? Because Israel appears and Jerusalem appears in the Bible. The Bible predates Islam and anyone else's claims to that region. And in fact, the Bible makes it very clear about God's promises. We said a long time ago that the United Nations, they don't understand the peace process. If they did understand the peace process, they would have to understand that they'd have to reckon with the God of Israel, because the Bible predates all these other things. So this is, listen, this is important. Nothing that you saw, to me, is political. You say, are you kidding me? It's all political. Not when you're talking about Israel and Jerusalem. It's not political. This is a spiritual issue. And to prove it, so Trump declares Jerusalem capital of Israel. Israeli news service, Muslim nations call for a summit if Jerusalem is recognized. Okay, I understand that. I understand their concern. Washington Post, it's catastrophic. U.S. allies reject Trump's expected Jerusalem pronouncement. That's not exactly true. Not all of our allies are upset. Some of our allies are upset in Europe because those particular nations that are upset have already surrendered to Islam. France is upset. England's upset because they will never speak out against Islam because they've already been taken by Islam. Mm-hmm. And that's how it happens, okay, a little bit at a time. Somebody would say Islam is a religion of peace. You're spelling peace wrong. It's peace, peace, peace. Somebody, you would say, oh, that's a mean thing to say. Really? Well, Turkey says declaring Jerusalem Israel's capital will start, quote, a fire with no end in sight. This is not a political decision. This is an issue that is really driven by spiritual warfare, spiritual battles. And what's amazing to what we're talking about, you guys, is you saw on world news that what Zechariah talks about in Zechariah 12, that there's a day coming. This is not that day. But it's one step closer to that day when Jerusalem will become the burdensome stone to all the surrounding nations. Notice it doesn't say to all the nations of the world. It says in Zechariah 12, to the surrounding nations, the nations that are around it. That's not what you saw today is not the fulfillment of Zechariah 12. We're one step closer, like never before in history. But what is also amazing is, I think it was Ambassador Bolton pointed out that 70 years ago, Truman had made the announcement, which, by the way, God used President Truman to facilitate in the birth of Israel, the influence of the nation, 1948, remarkable. But it's going to be 100 years this month where General Allenby, commander of the British forces, went into, they brought peace. They came into Israel, and then Allenby made the famous crossing into Israel and into Jerusalem. That's going to be 100 years ago. That is 100 years ago this week, which is significant. I think that's awesome. So you guys, just to recap, keeping this in mind. Oh, by the way, news from around the world. The Pope is saying this was a bad idea. I think what the Pope has to say is pretty irrelevant, honestly. Yeah. The Roman Catholic Church's history on how they deal with Israel, the Pope has nothing to say to this. The Roman Catholic Church has done everything in its power to prevent Israel from being a nation. They've not been a friend of Israel. Okay, let's just remember that right now. The nations of the world, out of all of them, there's going to be some that are going to protest this. Just mark this in your news analysis. They'll either protest Trump's leadership because they're scared of Islamic uprising in their countries, because remember, this is how Islam deals with things. If they don't like something that threatens their doctrine and the existence of Jerusalem, if you know the Quran and the Hadith, the existence of Jerusalem is impossible to Islam. Islam cannot dominate the world so long as there's a Jew, an Israel, and Jerusalem under Jewish control. Today's action flies in the face of the establishment of Islam to dominate the world. This is an important thing. So nations will either capitulate out of fear because of these things, or there's going to be nations that are going, like Turkey, like Erdogan in Turkey, they're going to say, I'm calling upon Muslims around the world to rise up against U.S. embassies worldwide. This is nothing new. This is how Islam deals with setbacks. Remember, its history is bloody and violent. And it is a religion of peace. And I'm not joking. We're spelling the word peace wrong. It's a peace here and a peace there until world dominance is secured. And you might say, I don't like what you're saying. Then you don't know European history. Because why did the King of Poland in 1683 rally the forces of Europe to fight against Islamic invaders in Vienna, Austria? What was Islam doing in Spain? What was Islam doing? Listen, the Battle of Tours in France and Charles Martel and the victories that Europe took up with the Crusaders to push back Islam in Europe. You got to ask yourself a question. What was Islam doing in Europe? They were trying then to establish world dominance. What was Islam doing in North Africa? Trying to establish world dominance. Today, finally, and for the young people in this room, you may not be aware, but for some 16 plus years, you've not seen leadership like this before. This is American leadership, and a lot of people don't recognize this. I'm old enough to recognize this. This is Reagan-esque, or Churchillian, if that's the right word for Winston Churchill. This is once in a lifetime, if once in a lifetime, leadership. You may not like Trump's hairstyle or his bombacity or his tweets. It's irrelevant. This is leadership. God placed him in office for moments just like you saw at 10:09 a.m. Pacific time. So we need to pray for him. Now we need to pray for the protection of his family. We need to pray for the protection of our military, of our embassies worldwide, because you're going to see soon. Look at the Wailing Wall.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool. Wow.
That's the Wailing Wall.
That's incredible.
So, anyway, you guys keep your eyes now. I'm not a prophet, but I'll predict there's either going to be A, worldwide violence regarding this, Or maybe Trump knows something that a lot of people haven't thought about. And that is, his timing to do this is very, very strategic, because the Islamic world right now and the Arab world is so fractured. It hasn't been this way in a long time, if ever, because right now Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt are all siding with the nation of Israel. The house of Islam is divided like never before. This is a tremendous time. The Shia and the Sunnis are pitted against each other, and Trump smells, as it were, political blood in the water. But we look beyond that. Our God is in control. Our God is moving these things. And so the epic moment is the fact that we need to make sure that we read every word in our Bible very carefully, because it's all true. Not some of it, all of it. Amen? Amen. God bless you guys.
Thank you very much.